Hi, this is State Senator Tom George. Welcome to my program, Current Events. Today I have with me a repeat guest, Mark Harvey, who is the state archivist who came over from the state archives. Mark, welcome back to my program.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on again. And I asked Mark to come because recently we had another birthday for Michigan, Michigan Statehood Day. And I went over to the museum that day. You have some special things out commemorating Michigan statehood, and I thought, well, that'd be an interesting topic for a program because Michigan's statehood was complicated by, well, a boundary dispute among other things.
Correct. So the statehood issue really began back in 1787. We didn't become a state till 1837, but this conflict had its roots in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and one of the complications was it drew the boundaries of Michigan from the text actually said from the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan east. Well, that seems clear enough, but there was a lot of dispute over what the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan was. So then what we get as a result of that discrepancy is this area of Toledo, what is now Toledo, Ohio, being disputed. And some people might wonder why in the world would people dispute the territory around Toledo, Ohio. And simply at the time, this was before railroad networks had evolved, and the real burgeoning way of transporting things was thought to be canals. And they thought, here's the Maumee River at the mouth of Lake Erie. Ohio had designs of creating a canal system all the way to the Ohio River. And Michigan had lots of plans for canals. There was one proposed to go from all the way across the state from Clinton Township all the way to Kalamazoo.
They started digging it, didn't they?
They did. We still have pictures of the ruins of that particular canal. So there was all this canal activity.
And some of this followed probably the success of the Erie Canal.
Correct.
That brought many Michigan settlers in.
So everyone thought this was going to be a great economic boom, and here's Toledo right in the middle of this dispute.
Now, let's see. So the Northwest Ordinance sets the stage for this problem because of the way it's written, and this is the boundary of the territories are set out here, or what to become of the future states are suggested in the ordinance?
Correct. The boundaries are set out, and also the requirements for statehood. You know, you had to have, I believe it was 60,000 inhabitants to be eligible to become a state, which Michigan had at the time of this dispute. And as far back as 1827, Michigan went in and organized the Toledo area, which meant they started collecting taxes.
So the territorial government was active there.
Yep, moved in, collected taxes, enforced laws at that time. And actually offered a compromise to Ohio at that time and said, hey, let's just split this 50-50. We'll take everything east of or west of the river, and you take everything east, and Ohio declined.
Ohio had already become a state. It became a state in 1803.
Correct,
so.
1803.
And so they claimed this area, but didn't organize it like Michigan territory did.
That's correct.
So they claimed it, but there wasn't a governmental presence there.
There was not a governmental presence, and I think what they were, at the time, they were relying on the fact that they were an organized state, even though Michigan was being really proactive in trying to organize the area. They weren't worried about it because they were a state and Michigan was just a territory. And they had, as far as the United States Congress went, Ohio was well represented. That 21 representatives, or a combination of 21 in Congress, and they were the most powerful western state at the time.
So Michigan is getting closer to statehood then. Like you say, in the 1820s, we've organized some government in this disputed area. The population of Michigan's growing. We're nearing the 60,000 threshold for statehood. And then what happened?
Well, in 1835, in late December 34, early January 1835, we petitioned Congress for an enabling act to become a state, and we were denied. And so,
was that based on this dispute, or was that?
It was based on this dispute. there wasn't a specific reason given. It was just denied, but the underlying reason was because this dispute was not settled. So Governor Stevens T. Mason, our boy governor, who I believe was around 34 years old at the time, went to the legislature, the territorial legislature, and declared a crisis and said, you know, we're being denied our rights under the Northwest Ordinance, and it's a travesty. And in response to being denied statehood, we instituted something called the Pains and Penalties Act, which was a somewhat severe measure that stated that if anyone tried to set up jurisdiction in that disputed Toledo area, they would be fined $1,000 and imprisoned for 5 years.
It would suffer pain and penalties.
Exactly.
So the territorial legislature instituted these measures. This was our response to being
This was our response.
denied.
And of course, Ohio claimed we did not have the ability to do that as a territory. There was some arguing back and forth, and the Attorney General for the United States actually upheld the Pains and Penalties Act.
Huh.
So in response to it, Ohio then resurveyed. You know, as we said before, they weren't doing anything officially. Now they got into the game, so to speak, and resurveyed that line, which was known as the Harris Line, which became a point of controversy later on. So now we have the Pains and Penalty Act. This all happened in April of 1835. Pains and Penalty Act is enacted, and we have the Harris Line survey done, and then towards the end of April, or during April itself, this dispute wasn't settled, so President Jackson sent 2 commissioners to Michigan, Ben Howard and Richard Gibson, I believe. And those 2 commissioners were supposed to settle the dispute between the 2 states, and they failed miserably, actually.
My guest is Mark Harvey, who is the state archivist. I didn't mention Mark has master's degrees from Wayne State in history and in information science. And how long have you been the state archivist for?
June will be 3 years. I've been with the Archives of Michigan for 12 years.
And we're talking about the Toledo boundary dispute, which was part of Michigan's statehood process. And Mark, I see you brought a map in here. Does that illustrate a little bit of this dilemma?
This shows you, this is one of the early survey maps from 1835. So you can see here's the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan, and then here are the 2 disputed lines. Here's the northerly route, which Michigan interpreted that to be, and then here's the southern point, which was the Harris Line, or which became the Harris Line. So right in the middle is Toledo. Here's the Maumee River sort of snaking up here, right into the middle of that fray.
So the dispute wasn't over the starting point, but
or
is it where you start here?
Indirectly, the dispute was where the starting point was, because that determined.
And then you just go due east from here.
Right.
And depending on where you start, you either get Toledo or you don't.
Correct. Correct. So I mean, early, the other real problem here is that early surveying wasn't very accurate. Michigan has a long history of inaccurate surveys, and plus we're a peninsula. We don't have nice, straight, predefined boundaries. So taking an initial point off the end of a lake when you don't really know what the southernmost point is
lake levels rise and fall, I
somewhat
suppose.
difficult, yeah.
Okay, so the commissioners are appointed by President Jackson.
Correct.
They actually come to the area?
They get here just in time to witness the first hostilities when a sheriff from Monroe, Michigan, Nathan Hubble, gets a posse together and heads down to Toledo to enforce the Pains and Penalty Act.
And when is this now?
This is April. This is early April, actually.
1835.
Yep, early April 1835.
So this Michigan sheriff is going to enforce the law.
Correct.
The territorial legislature has given him this charge.
Correct. So they go down